Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday weekly rankings here with Jim Coventry going over all the fantasy relevant, it seems like players and also the injury part of things, too. You'll see a lot of colors on the page today because we have a lot of relevant injuries that theoretically won't impact things this week, although maybe we'll get a call or two as the week progresses. Lots of waiver wire pickup discussion as well, too, with the overall guys that think a mundane waiver wire week, but ones that we can react to. And more importantly, injury situations that we didn't know about last week in the case of Michael Carter, Amari Mercado, for example. And Rico Dowdle had a career game as well, too, last week. All that stuff here on the weekly ranking show here with Jim Coventry. We always kick things off, Jim, with the quarterback position. And I actually think this should be a pretty good offensive week. Now, if you're without Lamar Jackson, probably for at minimum one more week, it seems like Brock Purdy probably won't play as well, too. Mac Jones gutted through a massive injury in that win over the Rams on Thursday, which was so impressive, I thought. You look at this slate of games, and especially the quarterbacks. I mean, it was a gentle tease from a couple weeks ago, but I said the only thing that you got incorrect this year was that Dak Prescott wasn't playing well. Well, nope. Turns out Jim actually was still right about that, too, because Dak Prescott has been on an insane heater the past 3 weeks, and it should continue against the Panthers, too.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I said with Prescott, look, that week one, he was doing great. That weather delay tanked everything in the game. Mm-hmm. But CD dropped like a couple long gainers in that one. But and there was another game that Dak had played well, but there were some mitigating circumstances. But oh my gosh, without CD Lamb, the dude got 4 touchdowns last week, just getting it done. But he is a supercomputer, and that's why I really liked him. 4 offensive linemen out, and I know the Jets, I don't think they could pressure me, but it doesn't matter. 4 starting offensive linemen, and it's just, and no CD Lamb, and yet there it is, Jake Ferguson, George Pickens. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, have fun, and watch it.
Yeah, I think he's easily a top 5 player this week, sort of like the lock and load that you would have for Baker Mayfield or any of the elite quarterbacks like Josh Allen. I think Dak Prescott at this point, especially in this matchup against the Panthers, certainly qualifies. On the other side, I had argued that Bryce Young is the top waiver wire streamer quarterback this week. Last week was Tua that ended up working out well, and I think if you're playing Bryce Young, you're doing so with some trepidation, some uneasiness with it, but the Dallas defense obviously has not been very good this season. They've allowed a lot of points. Even if it's just Bryce Young compiling in the second half of the game in which they're down by, let's just say, 3 scores, I don't mind Bryce Young. Now, I don't think he's quite in quarterback 1 territory, but I'm in a lot of leagues where I have to kind of consider it because it's just the bleakness of the position itself. Is Bryce Young sort of at that level to you, or do you think the Cowboys defense could provide troubles for him this week?
Had the Dolphins not choked and lost last week to Carolina, I would have been worried about a benching for Bryce Young because Dave Canales is to save his job. So fortunately, that lucky victory, I think that makes Young more viable because I think he was super close to getting pulled. Like he got pulled in one game when they were trailing big. And if Dallas comes out and scores touchdowns on the first 3 drives, it'll be interesting to see if they keep going with them because their path back would be Andy Dalton. I don't think that'll happen this week. So I do think, like you said, in garbage time, he tends to do okay. He hasn't run Bryce Young as much as he did last year. Because those last 6 weeks last year, I think he got 5 or 6 rushing touchdowns, and he was really there. I don't think he has more than 10 total rushing yards the last 3 weeks, top of my head. But that said, you're right. If you got to stream a quarterback and you're in desperate straits, garbage time is something that it counts just the same.
Exactly. The one game that I thought was almost a little troubling for me, and again, I talked about Tua last week as a streaming option, Dolphins against the Chargers, one of a handful of games that's a West Coast traveling to East Coast for a noon or 1 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. And it feels like the Chargers have a critical injury every other week. It was Khalil Mack 3 weeks ago, then Joe Alt, and now Amari Hampton on injured reserve. We'll get to the running backs in just a second, but I put the article out, or I have it in my article right now, the big betting sheet, which I post normally Wednesday evenings. I think we're underscoring how important Amari Hampton will be or was to this Chargers offense, not just because he was playing well, but because it allows them to play both the pass and the run. Now, with Amari Hampton out, being replaced, we'd think, by Kamani Vidal or Hassan Haskins or both, you're going to be one-dimensional. And I know the Chargers don't want to be, but you're going to have an ineffective rushing attack, which means Herbert has to be passing more. It's going to be kind of like those past couple of years where Herbert, who himself was banged up, had to throw 35, 40 times. I don't know how else they move the ball, and I sort of wonder in that scenario, Herbert probably has good fantasy value, but we have seen his totals dip down a little bit when he doesn't have that play action to work off of, last week being a perfect example. So where are you at with Herbert rest of season and certainly this week as well, too?
Joe, you know what's funny? There were studies done that show play action even works if you don't have a credible running game. It's players. There was a team 2 years ago, the Colts. They were really well trained by their defensive coordinator. I think it was Eberflus at the time, maybe. And they didn't bite on play action. But players, linebackers are trained to bite on it just because it's a natural occurrence of you don't know what to expect. And so they may continue to run play action. And as funny as it sounds, it could work. And remember, Miami there's a few teams like the worst cornerback room in the league. Well, Miami's in that group. And if you think about it, in the short area, you got McConkey, you got Keenan Allen. Maybe you don't dial up the deeper stuff to Quentin Johnson this week because Miami has one thing. If you're one-dimensional, they do have a pass rush that potentially could give you problems. And with both tackles obviously not around. But I think you could see McConkey and Allen just eating short and intermediate, and Miami not being able to do a darn thing about it all day long.
I think that's the way I would attack things if I'm game planning for the Chargers. And again, I'm not in any NFL rooms, nor am I nearly smart enough to do that. But you can have a run game be the extension of the pass game. Here's a 4-yard slant to Lab McConkey. Let's have some underneath with Keenan Allen. Theoretically, you have the best receiving core possible to execute this sort of vision against a defense that really is susceptible to it. Like I would play Herbert. I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I'll play Herbert. I think he's in a good spot here. And moving forward, if the Chargers can't establish the run, maybe there are worse weeks ahead. But I don't think it's this week. Now, somebody in the chat mentioned Oronde Gadsden getting more involved. I keep writing this in the notes for both Tyler Conklin and Oronde Gadsden. Theoretically, Will Dissly could be back this week. He's missed the past 3 weeks due to an injury. And also, if you have offensive line woes, as the Chargers do, the way to mitigate that is keeping your tight ends in and blocking. So it would be great if Gadsden was more involved. It would also be great if all 5 of the starting linemen were healthy, and it's not the case. Bradley Bozeman's getting just outright benched for Andre James as well, too. I saw that earlier today. Like, just the offensive line issues that are happening in Los Angeles are mitigating the Oronde Gadsden part of things. It's not that Gadsden has not been effective when he's had opportunities. The Chargers just need their tight ends to pass block because the offensive line has been so horrendous. So I'm not playing Oronde Gadsden. I think at this point he probably shouldn't be rostered with the lack of volume that I don't really see changing over the next month or so with this Chargers offense. One last game at quarterback I want to talk about, Jim, and it's the Colts and Cardinals. And it's interesting because entering the season, I'm sure many people would have thought this would be an offensive game that would be worth caring about, either from the Colts side or the Cardinals. But Kyler Murray is consistently at that low-end quarterback 1 range. I'm never excited to play him, but you look at the list afterwards, it's like, I guess I would go there. And Daniel Jones has been a pleasant surprise for a lot of people off of waiver wire. I think I would have had Daniel Jones higher than 17. So I'm wondering if you're seeing something with this Cardinals defense who's losing secondary pieces by the minute, or is it more that we are finally expecting Daniel Jones to turn back into the pumpkin that he had been for most of his career?
Daniel Jones stopped running after week 2. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. I think he has 1 rushing yard over his last couple games. He's not running. And then he had 1 game with 2 touchdowns. I think he has 1 touchdown in all the other games passing. So basically right now, if he's not going to run, he's basically good for about 240 and a touchdown. And the offense is great because Jonathan Taylor is kicking tail left, right, whatever he wants to go with the football. So, but that's the thing. They're not really leaning on Daniel Jones heavily, and they're not playing in garbage time games because they are really good, and they're usually leading. So they can just run when the thing gets late. Alec Pierce is coming back, which I shouldn't say he missed 2 games. You'd think he might be coming back. Let me just qualify it that way. We've seen Chris Olave miss a half a season with a concussion, so don't want to diminish those. Those are serious injuries. So, but it would help if they got Pierce back. But that's why I have Jones low. Jones has not had a ceiling since week 2, Joe.
Yeah, and the rushing touchdowns that he was getting vulturing Jonathan Taylor in the first 2 weeks of the season, those aren't there either. Now, the volume part of the passing game I do think remains, but you're right. I mean, we're talking about a ceiling play, which is why Daniel Jones is more in that middle of the pack, and Kyler Murray is what he is at this point as well, too. Are we good to move over to the running backs? You feel good about that?
Oh, definitely, Joe.
All right, so let's start first with the Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins thing, which hopefully for everyone listening, it does not matter. I'm in leagues where I'm going to have to probably play one of them, much like last week I was going to have to play Amari DiMercato or Michael Carter. Of course, I got that wrong. And in Stake League, Jim, I did play Amari DiMercato because I had Chuba Hubbard. It would have been great to have those 8 extra points in that format. Obviously, we'll have to see if Amari DiMercato ends up seeing the field anymore for the Cardinals. But with the Chargers backfield, we have heard reports from Daniel Popper, and I want to make sure everyone listening is understanding this. I think Daniel Popper is one of the best beat reporters across every team. Like, if Daniel says something about the Chargers, that is basically gospel to me. Daniel Popper says Hassan Haskins is the next man up in that Chargers backfield. If that is the case, the Chargers are moronic. Hassan Haskins is not that kind of guy who can take volume and also go ahead and get 4 yards plus carries. Not that I think Kamani Vidal is either. He had opportunities last year and never really emerged from that role. But if they are asking Hassan Haskins to be anything close to J.K. Dobbins or Myron Hampton this year, the Chargers will fail. So what do you do with this? Because, again, we both think Daniel Popper is one of the best in the world at this. And if he's saying it's Hassan Haskins, I think we have to treat it as such. But my football brain says, no way that happens. It has to be Kamani Vidal that gets some workload this week.
Well, they did sign Nyheim Hines yesterday for what that's worth. And I tell you what, Hines has as much use with this offense as the rest of them because none of them have played. So, I mean, funny, the dude could walk in and be a pass-catching back. He's been irrelevant for years. But could you see him getting, pass-catching back late in the game if Herbert just wants to dump it out into the flat? Funny as that sounds, it would be very hilarious if Nyheim Hines caught 3 passes, scored a short touchdown, and beat them all for fantasy. It won't happen, but it's a funny story. I just think we need to go back to the 90s. Houston Oilers, Atlanta Falcons, run and shoot offense. Get 4 receivers on the field. Spread them out. Maybe go 5 receivers. And you know what? Just snap it in shotgun and get it out. That's what they need to do. And
an extension of the run game, right?
Right. I'm half joking, but I'm pretty serious.
I think that's the way I would beat the Dolphins. I don't know if that happens for the next 4 weeks entirely. And again, I made this point in the waiver wire article. A guy like Jerome Ford feels like the obvious target for the Chargers, relatively cheap in terms of salary, but also I think would be cheap to acquire from the Browns. We just saw the Browns trade away Joe Flacco as well. And if and when Amari Hampton comes back healthy, you could have Jerome Ford still facilitate along with Amari Hampton. When that occurs, Jerome Ford to me is like one of those obvious pickup and plays, but we haven't seen that happen yet. And there's no reason for the Browns to go ahead and make that move just yet either. But I caution people on the waiver wire article, and I think I still am this way, even though I'm sure we're going to see some pretty insane waiver wire budgets in terms of both these running backs here in the next 24 hours or so, if it has not already occurred. I don't think either Hassan Haskins or Kamani Vidal have any more than 2 weeks of utility. And if you need to use them for these 2 weeks, fine. Mm-hmm. Go for it. I get it, and especially Daniel Popper saying it's Hassan Haskins. I'm going to default to Daniel Popper because he knows more about this team than anybody else. It just does not seem like a smart strategy. And I would agree with you, Jim. Let's just have 5 wide out there. That's why you have a Trey Harris or a Keandre Lambert-Smith, who the depth that the Chargers have at receiver makes complete sense to me. So coming off this is then you had since we last on the recording, you had Bucky Irving. That was going to be now with 3 separate injuries, the shoulder being the most egregious of them, likely keeping him out this week. Of course, missed last week, so Rashad White steps up. You have Chuba Hubbard, who is dealing with calf injuries in both of his calves. So Rico Dowdle has a career game now going against his former team, the Cowboys. And then the Michael Carter part of things ends up being the major volume guy. This was a major debate in the fantasy community. I'm sure you saw it on Twitter. Jim, I know I did as well, too. Is it Amari DiMercato? Is it Michael Carter? Michael Carter, former Jet, ends up doing well, and Amari DiMercato, I don't think actually fumbled at the goal line. That was not conclusive evidence in my mind. And yes, I'm a bitter fantasy manager who had to play DiMercato, but even still, it was Michael Carter that got a crazy amount of volume. So with these 3 now new situations, let's assume Bucky Irving, Chuba Hubbard do not play. How are you ranking the Rico Dowdle, the Michael Carter, and whatever the situation will be like here with more of these backups? Because I think this is going to be a pertinent question for a lot of folks this week.
Dowdle and Hubbard are exact matches. If you see my rankings, I put Hubbard at 16 in yellow because of the injury, figuring he won't play, and it's 17 about Rico Dowdle. So Rico Dowdle is going to slide right in Hubbard's spot. They put up almost the same numbers last year with Dowdle playing in Dallas and Hubbard playing in Carolina.
Yeah.
But remember, Dowdle down the stretch last year, it was like 600 or 700-yard games in the second half of the season. I mean, he was tearing it up. And apparently, Marcus Mosher, a writer for Dallas, said that the reason Dowdle didn't have a hot free agent market is apparently he has some long-term neck issue that he's kind of had. Not enough to keep him off the field, but that's why he didn't have a hot free agent market. But the dude can play. And so this is no downgrade at all from Chuba Hubbard to Dowdle. It might even be an upgrade. 200 yards last week, maybe so, right?
Right.
So that's no problem. You also mentioned Michael Carter. Now, Michael Carter fortunately had 5 catches, fortunately got a touchdown. Horribly inefficient. Just very inefficient. Like the yards per carry was at a little over 2. Top of my head is about right.
Yeah, something like that.
I am at running back 29 against Indy. Now, could he catch passes? Yes. Could he score a touchdown? Yes. So you definitely use him and play him if you need him. But I have him in the running back 3 range because that inefficiency is real. There's a reason he's been out of the league on and off for a few years.
Right.
But I get it. Volume's king in fantasy football. So you certainly play a player who's going to get the ball. And like you said, I don't know if DeMercado's going to be back on the field. The coach got fined $100,000 for getting in his face. I don't think he hit him, but maybe he did.
He like kind of shoved him. But I that's one of those things too. We talk about fantasy football and here's the numbers and you see all those graphs and whatever. This is a real football thing, but it's also a real person thing. In my mind, if I was to get suspended at RotoWire, it wouldn't be $100,000. I'll tell you that. But let's just say I got suspended $100 for treating my interns correctly. I would have a bias toward my intern, whether it's fair or not. I would, and I know that the NFL head coach is probably a different position than Joe Bartel managing interns at RotoWire, but that's a real world thing, right? And I just between the gaffe itself and then all the headlines drawn to getting the largest fine ever since Bruce Arians initially brought that rule upon it for chewing out one of his players at the sideline. Like, it just feels like I wouldn't be surprised if Bam Knight or even like Dearness Johnson sees more playing time than Amari DeMercado this week. And I think that's where I go back to. I actually think I would bump up Michael Carter a bit more because if we assume game script the way Vegas is saying, where the Colts are a near touchdown favorite, Michael Carter should be in a position as a pass catcher in PPR leagues to really, I think, get a lot of work just because there isn't anything else really happening in Arizona.
You know why I worry about this? I think DeMercado's still a passing down back because of the fine and the high profile. If the coach now benches him, it would be, if he hadn't done the sideline thing, it's no issue. But I think now the school of public perception and like the HR components of things is gonna be like, well, you did this to him and now you did that to him. And I just wonder if somebody in management said, you know what? Put him back in his role. We don't want to take an organizational hit for doing it. Again, it sounds stupid. And had there not been the sideline incident and the big press and media on that, DeMercado would be shunned. I think he gets his passing down role, but that's speculative. But like you said, Carter was definitely a factor.
Yeah, I think that's a good breakdown of it. Now, we didn't talk about this with the quarterbacks because I hope you guys don't have to play Joe Flacco this week. But I do think Joe Flacco actually opens up a lot, certainly for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, which for a lot of people are probably lock and load no matter what, unfortunately, but possibly fortunately now with the quarterback trade that happened yesterday. Chase Brown's interesting to me because Joe Flacco theoretically is a guy that can make his reads, look downfield, and then make a check down. You have a Joe Flacco, you acquire Joe Flacco because he can process correctly. So Chase Brown might be one of those that sees a bit more PPR opportunities. And the Packers defense, they have been uneven is the way I'll describe it as a Packer fan. But they don't always I think if I'm the Packers defense, I'm making sure Jamar Chase and T. Higgins do not beat me. And I will live with a Chase Brown getting 5 catches for 50 yards. It's kind of what Jahmyr Gibbs did in that week 1 game where the Packers beat the Lions. So is this a bump up for Chase Brown with Joe Flacco now theoretically the starting quarterback for the Bengals, at least if not this week, moving forward?
I'm thinking long and hard about moving Chase Brown up from running back 30, which is where he deserves to be after the last few weeks. I am thinking about it. It's hard to move him past some of the players who are on the list ahead of him, but maybe the following week I will, because the thing with Browning was, and I pointed this out, yes, he could throw deep, but teams knew he wanted to get the ball out quickly. So that means you condense your defense, and that means Brown wasn't going to have the free yards he would have, obviously, when Burrow was in there. But I think that Joe Flacco is a completely different beast because defenses know he doesn't give a darn. He's going to chuck the ball downfield. Right. If Higgins going downfield or Chase, he's going to throw. So defenses can't necessarily say, we're going to pack it all down, because if they do, they could get beat for some big plays. And that's what the whole NFL, overall defensive mindset is. Limit explosive plays. So that's why you were playing a shell against them with Burrow. You kind of have to play a shell with Flacco because Flacco doesn't care. So, and he gets it out quick, but Chase can get downfield quick. Higgins can get downfield quick. So I do think, in theory, Chase Brown does have more room to operate. So don't be surprised. And again, I'm probably going to move him up my rankings. Don't be surprised if Chase Brown comes in and has a game while the Packers are playing pass defense.
I did an event at UW-Madison here. We are located close to the Madison school, the college school. We work with the internship. Our interns work with that school very closely, and we'll go over and do events every once in a while. I like doing them because I can actually get a pulse on what feels like a more casual experience from a fantasy perspective and hear what the kids are asking us, questions like that. And I think I got 4 Ja'Cory Kroski Merritt related questions. And I asked them I think I had a raise hand on how many guys did your drafts after August 18th? I picked an arbitrary day, but we watched Ja'Cory Kroski Merritt have his value surge in those last 2 weeks of drafts. And I think for a lot of people who drafted then, Kroski Merritt has been a disappointment outside of last week, where he ends up taking over the Commanders' backfield. And I'll ask you this because I didn't really have a good answer. Do you think Kroski Merritt has taken over the Commanders' backfield? Do we have some sort of degree of confidence in that? Or was this a situational thing where the Commanders had a positive game script and could rely on Kroski Merritt more in that way?
I'd like to say I could remember where I read it, but before last week's game, there was a note I had read regarding the coaching staff saying that Kroski Merritt was going to be more involved. So I knew going into that game, I think they were flipping the script and going to them. The thing with Kroski Merritt that is really different is he has juice to the outside, and Cliff Kingsbury likes getting some outside running going. And that's why they got rid of Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson is a player that was more of an inside grinder, and really that's what Chris Rodriguez is. Right. And I think they finally figured out Kroski Merritt can do this. He can get the outside run game going. And you saw him just play after play, getting to the outside. And the Chicago defense is not scary in any way at all. We like the idea of Dennis Allen coaching them. And I know they're coming off a bye week, and maybe that defense comes up with something, but it hasn't been a good defense. So Kroski Merritt, I have him with the upside tag at running back 23, but you could easily make a case. If you roll back last week's workload, you can easily make a case that he's at like running back 19 or so without a problem at all. He looked really good last week.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of getting close to that point too. I liked Chris Rodriguez entering the year, and I think Jerry McNichols still probably has his role within that offense. The best offenses don't want to have to rely on one guy unless they have a Jonathan Taylor or even like a Derrick Henry. But the Ravens, when they're functioning, still use Justice Hill a little bit, right? I think that's kind of part of this too, that the Commanders, I think, like having that backfield. But at some point, the rubber meets the road. You have to have some of your more talented guys out there, even if you're trying to save plays or project for the rest of the season. So Kroski Merritt feels like one of those. I'm not going out and aggressively acquiring Kroski Merritt, but it's one of those that I think now we're more solidified in that approach. Along the same lines as a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who right now is running back 19 on your list. Reminder that we have a third straight week of early morning games, this one in London with the Broncos and Jets. Jets, a miserable franchise. We'll have to see if that ends up being erased or negated somehow with the trip overseas, but I would expect it's not going to. Vegas has the Broncos as a 7.5-point favorite. Dobbins has been literally Mr. Reliable, either 100 yards or a touchdown basically every single week.
Yes.
The R.J. Harvey thing has not happened yet. Whatever Sean Payton Joker role, it still has not transpired to this degree. I think Dobbins is one of those that you might be able to get for relatively cheap in trades, because somebody who drafted Dobbins, it's almost like the Michael Pittman of running backs, where you're like, oh yeah, he's been good. Well, he's not this guy. He's not this level of efficiency or whatever else. So Dobbins rest of season, like what are you thinking the Broncos backfield is going to look like? Is it just going to be status quo for the rest of the way?
To the highest degree, yes, it'll be somewhat the same. We saw when they do win games big against Cincy in week 4, we saw R.J. Harvey have a real role, and we saw Sean Payton make sure to put Dobbins back in. It was clear he wanted to get him 100 yards. And as soon as he hit 100 yards, he pulled him off the field. So it was a very weird thing that he just wanted to get him numbers. But that Harvey was very involved in a game they were winning comfortably, and Harvey looked good. This is a game where I worry about that happening again. Like you said, Dobbins rest of season, you're going to get the same. That offensive line's very good. It's a very well schemed up offense. They have a good marriage of run and pass. So Dobbins can get things going without being overly predictable. So yes, but this week, I think both Dobbins and RJ Harvey have upside, because the Jets are really a bad franchise. Last week, they can't tackle. They can't rush the passer. I don't think they have a sack all season. No, they have a sack. There's something weird about their defense gets no pressure at all. Like last week, Dak Prescott with 4 backup linemen,
right,
had all the time he wanted to throw. That was stunning.
Yeah, and the way that the Cowboys have to beat somebody is different than the way the Broncos want to beat somebody. But I always go back to the path of least resistance. We have literally a month's now worth of tape of the Jets just having zero clue how to defend the pass, being able to get to the quarterbacks. Not that they're going to open up Bo Nix because this is theoretically a game where a lot of eyes are on them. But if the easiest way to beat the Jets and do it so convincingly is to have Bo Nix to say attempt 35 passes. Dobbins can still benefit. Obviously, we saw Javonte Williams have a monster day last week as well, too, in that capacity. I just think you're going to see a lot more passing opportunities. And whether that be Troy Franklin as like the secondary beneficiary outside of Cortland Sutton, is another Evan Ingram game. Like, if there's going to be volume in that passing attack, I think the Broncos are going to be able to kind of execute that just fine.
And they can't stop the run either, though. But like you said, you're right, because when you saw Cincinnati, if I remember correctly, there was a lot of people who ate in that game. Knicks had a good fantasy game. They
Marvin
all
Mims
ate.
did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they all ate. So I think you're looking at the same thing, Joe. So you're right on with that. Yes, that pretty much anybody who wants to get the ball from Sean Payton, him schemed up, they're all going to eat. It's just a matter of how many points they score. But don't be surprised if they come out aggressively that they could score 40 points in this game.
Let's move over to the receivers, and we got at least one answer, I thought, on a conundrum of the injured situations. That was Tyreek Hill with that unfortunate knee injury. What were the Dolphins going to do? We thought maybe Nick Westbrook-Akine was going to get more involved. Malik Washington, is he going to get the Tyreek Hill snaps? Thankfully, Jim, Mike McDaniel did what we wanted him to do and just had Jalen Waddle in that sort of capacity. Now, Darren Waller had a good first half, and that allowed the Dolphins to get ahead early. Of course, lost that game to the Panthers. But Waddle, I feel I never want to actually say these words with the Dolphins, but I feel relatively safe that with Tyreek Hill done for the rest of the year, Waddle is kind of conventionally going to be a low-end wide receiver one for me. There's no reason why they should pivot off using Waddle in the capacity that they did last week. Do you feel that same way, or is there just a bit of uneasiness for you as well, given the history of the Dolphins and how it seems like they make things overly complicated at times?
Waddle was quietly having a decent fantasy season, even when Tyreek Hill was there. It was like 15, 16 PPR points. It wasn't it wasn't anything great, but it wasn't bad. So he was actually performing a bit. Like you're saying, he took the role over. I mean, not the same role, but the lead role. And it's not going to see all the Tyreek Hill routes. And, of course, the 46-yard touchdown was underthrown, and Tua's there pumping his fist. Jalen Waddle had to do a little turnaround and grab the ball and try to get into the end zone before the defender caught him. It should have been an easy walk-in. But, hey, that's the nature of the game, right? But Waddle had 9 targets, and it had been no more than 6 in any other game. So, yes, at this point, I think we're looking at Miami. Look, Miami was winning almost that whole game, and they're going to be trailing a lot. So those 9 targets could be 12-target games upcoming. Now, start looking for that. Now, the Chargers, don't know if the Chargers are going to be able to beat up offensive line to run out to a big lead. But again, going forward, Waddle is somebody, like you said, he could be a wide receiver one on volume, especially in those games we said that you're going to often be playing from behind.
I want to get to some waiver wire receivers in just a bit, because I think there's actually value if you must start either Kendrick Bourne or Ryan Flournoy. But somebody in the chat actually mentioned Emeka Egbuka at 15, and I'm actually wondering the same thing too. Like, we have Baker Mayfield as quarterback 5, rightfully so. Mike Evans, we expect not to play again this week, although theoretically he's getting closer to his return. I need him to, so therefore he won't. That's the Joe Bartel stink story if you have Mike Evans. But Emeka Egbuka has been literally feels like matchup proof in the same way that Jackson Smith-Njigba has been super successful. You have JSN up near the top. Is Emeka Egbuka in a tough spot against the Niners this week, or is this a situation that really the top 15 or so are all kind of more or less equal?
They are kind of equal, but the 49ers have played exceptional defense this year. And look, no shade in Egbuka. He has been a superstar. These plays cannot keep happening. They're not going to happen every week. It's not going to be 17 weeks of him making ridiculous plays. That just isn't reality. And I know Baker Mayfield is the one. He's a huge playmaker, and I get it. But San Francisco is a very well-coached defense, and they're very well-coached in the secondary. So look, they're all interchangeable. And where I have Egbuka, he's starting for your fantasy team. Doesn't even matter. He's starting. So where the exact number is, so what? But he's starting because you can't ignore the great beginning of the career that he's had. But, yeah, this matchup could be a little bit more closer to the vest. But the 49ers, they definitely won. With Robert Saleh, they definitely are going to have the target on Egbuka. And they're going to, Godwin clearly isn't back yet. He's playing, but he's not to his level. So it's going to be a clear focus by Saleh to kind of slow him down. This isn't Puka Nacua with the Rams, where he's open every play, doesn't matter who he plays. So, look, love Egbuka. It's a great start this week. Don't blink or worry about it, but just don't be surprised if he doesn't have the crazy play like the 70-yard touchdown or, the insane. That's not going to happen every week.
Right, and the Eagles one from 2 weeks ago, it was two secondary people that ran into each other, and Mekabuka ends up catching it and goes the distance for the touchdown. I agree with you. I understand that Stafford throwing for nearly 400 yards. I think that's in large part the way the Rams operate. Although
Yes.
you can make an argument that without Bucky Irving, that's the way that the Buccaneers probably should operate too. Whether they choose to do so or not is a different part of that.
Yeah, real quick, don't even cite that Rams game if you're thinking about other people, because the Rams, Sean McVay, nobody is stopping that offense this year. Nobody. I called this out once I knew Stafford's back was clear. I go, nobody will stop them through the air. Stafford's a supercomputer, and the other thing is he has a good offensive line. Puka is open every single play.
Mm-hmm.
He is schemed up open every single play. Does not matter who he's against. He could be playing like the Hall of Fame secondary. McVay will have him open, and Stafford will read that. And then Devontae Adams is the man beater. So if you play man, good luck beating Devontae, because you got to worry. Defenses cannot focus on both of those receivers. Any defense is, they're stuck. They have no chance against the Rams. So don't cite the Rams when you're talking about other defenses. The Rams are a supernova this year.
Yeah, nobody can replicate them. I'm with you on that. I did set the stage with the Mekabuka at 15 to talk about A.J. Brown at 18. And I think a lot of people who have A.J. Brown right now are going to be doing exactly what Kyle was, but in the inverse, saying there is absolutely no way A.J. Brown should be 18 overall. He's been a super big disappointment outside of 1 week, and they're already infighting in Philadelphia. There's no way I could play A.J. Brown. I know what you're going to say, Jim, that this is a horrendous Giants secondary. You theoretically is a get right spot. I think I saw you talk about it on Twitter, Jim Coventry NFL, where the Eagles, either leadership or the coaching staff, seem like they actually bend to the wills of the players and want to get them involved even more than they probably should from a game process. I am still nervous playing A.J. Brown. I have to do it. I think in certain places I'll have to play A.J. Brown, but 18 feels pretty high for a guy that 4 of the 5 weeks has not done anything.
He should be ranked 40. He should be ranked 40. But as soon as A.J. Brown goes 10 for 150 and 3 touchdowns, and it's going to happen. So it's impossible. If you're rostering this guy, I mean, you can't trade him because he has no trade value. You can't cut him because he's A.J. Brown. Right. But you can't bench him unless you're in an 18 league. And then you have, a bunch of wide receiver twos. Then you sit him. But if you're in any normal – he had 9 targets last week. And so – and again, they were forcing the ball. It was just dumb how they did it. And playing Denver, Surtain pretty much was on Brown the entire game. Surtain's not playing to his normal level, but that was a bad matchup. But, yeah, it's impossible to advise somebody with any rationale on starting A.J. Brown. It's just that he's A.J. Brown. He's not injured. There are going to be games. You don't want that 35-point game when he's on the bench, or a 30-point game.
I would agree with you. And this is a Joe Bartel answer, not a what you guys should do. But the thing that I have learned over my 2 decades now playing fantasy football, but the past decade at working at RotoWire, I absolutely hate when I overthink things and I have a stud go off of my bench. Like the guy I drafted doesn't do well for 3 weeks, and then I put him on the bench, and of course he ends up going off. That's the thing that pisses me off the most, and I refuse to put myself in those spots to reasonable circumstances. If the Eagles were playing probably a half dozen other opponents, totally fine benching A.J. Brown. This week, coming off their first loss, a nationally televised game against the Giants of all teams, I think A.J. Brown has to be in there. Maybe it's a circumstance or just intuition. Like I'm playing A.J. Brown because I think he will have a good game because the Eagles will make sure A.J. Brown has a good game. Why they can't do that week in, week out, I don't know. We're not talking about Sean McVay here as the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. That's just not what's happening. No. But I think A.J. Brown will. I would be playing A.J. Brown in most circumstances.
So, and I know you heard me say this in the preseason.
Yeah.
Kevin Petullo was one of those coaches. I said he has no serious coaching experience. Didn't call plays, didn't run an offense. These guys were around. I get it. But until you are calling plays and making adjustments against NFL defenses, you don't have serious coaching experience when you're running an NFL offense. And we're seeing that's exactly what's going on here. Kevin Petullo is so far over his head right now. Saquon Barkley got 6 carries in a game they were winning through the middle of the fourth quarter.
Right.
And I know their line has been great, but all they had to do was run the ball against a pretty average Denver run defense, especially against a physical running back, and they would have easily salted that game away. Petullo is just completely out of his depth.
All right, Kyle and I are of the same brain because I was just going to ask about Stephon Diggs, who I think predictably, or at least if you watched my Friday video on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube page, Stephon Diggs was going to have a revenge game against the Bills. He didn't score a touchdown, but that was a show of force, I thought, of Stephon Diggs against his former team, and now obviously doing well for the Patriots. That was the second game in which Diggs was fantasy relevant, the week before being the first. And I know we're going to all watch what happened Sunday night. Patriots upset win over the Bills. Drake made it some awesome things. Stephon Diggs was nuclear, and be like, all right, fire it up. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 2, rest of the way. I'm uneasy about that. And I loved Stephon Diggs. I have multiple bets here at the office with coworkers, which I will win because I'm smarter than them, about Stephon Diggs being a fantasy relevant guy relative to his ADP. I just don't think I'm quite there yet. Or is this a scenario where Stephon Diggs now officially has shed that knee injury that had happened last year? He's more healthy. He's got more rapport with Drake May. I mean, like, consequentially, are you playing A.J. Brown over Stephon Diggs? Because I think a lot of people might be in this conundrum.
Yeah, so if you're in that conundrum, I have them both as wide receiver 2s, 18 and 23 against that same bucket. They're in the same group. The one thing I worry about New England here is this. New England's coming off a huge emotional road win.
Yes.
They're going to the road against an inferior opponent.
Uh-huh.
If the game plays out and the Saints are able to keep it close, it's going to be close. It's not going to be like the Patriots are going to have to chase through the air. But the other way, the Patriots probably come into this game with a little more conservative of a game plan. Probably try to grind down and just take the road game. I think this is a low-scoring game. And I don't think they're going to have to feature Diggs here. So it's more about the anticipated game. I mean, could you see this game ending 16-13?
2017. Yeah, I think the over-under was at like 45.5, which was like a little too high for me. I wrote in my article, can a trap game happen after the big divisional win? But yes, I think the answer, I agree with you entirely.
Oh, yeah. That's when they happen.
Mike Vrabel is a really good coach, and I will often default to saying the really good coach won't have his team ill-prepared. But we saw it with the Chargers against the Giants, right? That was a West Coast, East Coast travel. Jackson Dart making his first start. We think Jim Harbaugh is a good coach, and that still happens. Like, you could be a good coach team, but when you have young players and also led by a young quarterback, inconsistencies happen. I think this game is going to be close. I didn't take the Saints to cover because it just feels really uncomfortable for me to do that. But I am going to be wrong, I think, about this. I think the Patriots and Saints game will probably be closer than a lot of people are anticipating.
Yeah, those trap games, it's a human nature thing because we've had lots of great coaches that know about these things, but there's a subliminal switch, and they're just the humanity of the game very rarely gets baked in because you can't really predict it. You don't know, well, are they going to have this happen to them? Right. But over time, we see it frequently. You come off a big win and you have a patsy opponent on the schedule. It's a letdown. You're coming off an emotional high and you're not getting up emotionally for the Saints. You want to say you will, your coaches say they're dangerous, but the back of your mind says they're the Saints. And that's just how human nature works.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I might have to change my pick because I'm right there with you. I didn't want to go ahead and put myself out there, but I think that's exactly what could happen here for the Patriots. Again, a younger team led by a younger quarterback as well. Inconsistencies happen even when we think the Patriots are a playoff caliber team. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Saints end up making this one close. We're getting a ton of questions in the chat about different trades. For the most part, the start sits are based off your weekly rankings, but I know, Jim, you do the show on Sunday afternoons on the RotoWire YouTube channel. What is that now? 11 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern, right? Or 10 a.m. Central to noon Central. Yeah, right before.
2 hours before the main slate kicks off to make it easy to remember what time zone you're in. Then we
there you go. Thank you. Away. Yes. So either we can reach out to Jim at that point too in the RotoWire YouTube page, or at Jim Coventry NFL or JB Fantasy Sports as well on Twitter. Happy to answer trade questions there. I want to make sure that we're going through at least some of the weekly ranking part of things, and not always does that coincide with the trade stuff. So I'm not ignoring you guys in the chat. It's just more so that there's other ways to go ahead and direct those questions again to Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter or JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter as well. Happy to take a lot of those questions. Or we have a great Ask an Expert feature on RotoWire. YouTube 15 gets you 15% off the RotoWire subscription itself as well. 2 other receivers, I promise. Then we'll move over to the tight ends, which I think is more or less cut and dry. Kendrick Bourne, Ryan Flournoy. If you are like me, Jim, and desperately needing to play a receiver, I think my answer might be Ryan Flournoy in a better spot against the Panthers than assuming Kendrick Bourne will be the featured target again for Kyle Shanahan. Arguably, both are totally fine wide receiver 3s in PPR leagues if you need it. I don't know if I'm jaded because I thought Demarcus Robinson was going to be that guy Thursday and I was wrong, or if this is more acknowledging that I want to bet on Dak Prescott more to be able to have a functioning fantasy offense than Mac Jones, who's dealing with, it seems like, some sort of injury along with everything else San Francisco has been going through on a week-to-week basis.
Joe, I was the weirdo that had Bourne as my wide receiver 36 last week. That wasn't bad. That was a high ranking. I don't think anybody
Good for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And why did I put him there? Well, obviously you had Pearsall and Jennings out, but I remembered that Kendrick Bourne had played with Mac Jones before in New England. They had chemistry. And I thought to myself, the Rams have these really small corners. Not that Bourne's a big guy, but Bourne would be able to win again. They're not great corners. So Bourne was he's a bit technical when he runs. So he can win. And Mac Jones had that comfort with him. And that my argument with Robinson was they probably hardly had any reps together. So it was going to be a thing with Bourne. That's why, again, 36. But I never saw 10 for 142. Honestly, I saw about 45, 50 yards, I was thinking, which would put you at wide receiver 36. 142, didn't see that one coming, but certainly. But yeah, so, I mean, if both receivers are out, again, Pearsall and Jennings, then I think you can take a look back. But we got to wait on the injury report because, my guess is they could get one of them back.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ricky. Pearsall had that unstable knee. We heard that last week. I would assume Pearsall of the two is probably unlikely. Juwan Jennings has been banged up almost the entire year. Niners, I thought were punting that Thursday game and end up getting a win out of it, which is crazy. And then Brock Purdy having, it seemed like, aggravated an injury or it added an additional one. I don't think he ends up playing, although we'll have to see with the injury report for the Niners coming out later today, at least for the start of the week. George Kittle, for what it's worth, it sounds like he will be out one more week as well, too. So if you need to go down the Jake Tonjes route, I guess that's fine as well. I do like Ryan Flournoy. Like, I think if you are trying to find a 1 week starter, you can do both. But I feel actually pretty confident with what we're seeing out of Dak Prescott, that he's going to find his best receivers, and that's not always George Pickens. It is always Jake Ferguson, but it's not always George Pickens, and Ryan Flournoy has been clearly head and shoulders above Jalen Tolbert, another one that I got wrong, and we'll have to see if Kevontae Turpin ends up playing or not as well, too, for the Cowboys. Let's move over to the tight end position, and it's interesting. You have Jake Ferguson listed number 2, Tyler Warren 3, Dalton Kincaid 4, just like we all predicted at the start of the year. Brock Bowers being banged up. We'll have to see if he ends up playing this week, too, because this is quietly be a really good spot for him against the Titans if he was able. But if it's not Brock Bowers, the healthy target that we saw last year, we're just talking about low-end tight end 1 production with the injury stuff that he seems to be dealing with. So even if Bowers is available, is it possible that you don't play him this week?
You have to play him. He's going to get a floor for you if he plays. I have him low because I don't think he's playing. The team is stupid to put him on the field right now. They're not a competitive team. They're not going anywhere. Why would you play him? He's clear he was playing with a knee injury the 2 prior games. It wasn't Brock Bowers not playing well. He has a knee injury.
Correct.
And they finally were smart enough to sit him. I don't think you sit him for 1 game for a knee issue that's been a problem for a month now.
You're right.
You got to get him 100% healthy. My guess is he doesn't play, but if he does play, he still has a knee injury. And so I just don't think he has any ability to get consistent yards after the catch. And it's not his fault. Not his fault at all.
Right. And Geno Smith has been playing so poorly, too. Like, to your point, I mean, they are not anywhere near playoff aspirations. I feel like the Raiders are, and you should be making sure your star player is eventually healthy to whatever degree that they can be 100% healthy during October. I would imagine Brock Bowers should not be out there. We saw the debut of Dylan Gabriel, obviously makes his first professional start, ended up being okay in London. Browns end up losing that game, throws for nearly 200 yards. It was the David Njoku and Harold Fannin show the entire way, which was not at all surprising to any of us who watched a little bit of Dylan Gabriel in the preseason. No, we're all clamoring for Shedeur Sanders, not me, but watching Dylan Gabriel, I felt very confident in Njoku and Harold Fannin would be totally fine pieces. You have Njoku listed at tight end 14, right ahead of my guy, Mason Taylor, who I have not gotten anything right, it feels like, Jim. I'm the inverse to you, who has been just on a heater for at least a month and a half now. I felt very confident Mason Taylor would be one of those guys you're very happy to draft with one of your last picks. I ended up dropping him in a few places. Now ends up being one of the top waiver wire pickups this week. Back-to-back weeks where he's one of the top target getters in New York. And I think this situation doesn't change. What I said at the beginning of the year, that it's going to be Garrett Wilson and somebody else, now we've kind of, I think, have it established with Justin Fields. So Mason Taylor at tight end 15, do you think he'll end up rising up the ranks, or is this an appropriate spot relative to the David Njokus of the world?
he easily could rise up the ranks. Kelsey had a good game. I got to give him a little respect. Goddard's been scoring touchdowns at an unreal rate.
Yeah.
Juwan Johnson, with one more bad week, is going to drop out of the top 15. His snaps are going down. His targets are going down. So we'll see if that's a trend. But again, with the beginning of the year, I still got to keep him a little bit aggressive because it may just have been the way games worked out. Waller had to sail way up because, oh my goodness, and the damage he did in the first
half. Yep.
So, but Mason Taylor, look, I said this all off season. Justin Fields showed it in Chicago. He had DJ Moore and he had Cole Kmet. Both had career years with him. And I said that Taylor would be the de facto number 2. He dealt with an early season injury. So now he's healthy. So, yes, Mason Taylor could be ranked higher than that. I have him as a borderline starter. They're playing Dallas last week. I mean, that certainly helps, right? But he's had 2 good games in a row. Mason Taylor, if you need somebody, if I had him or Kyle Pitts, look, Pitts has been doing some. I'd probably start him over Kyle Pitts at 13. I probably still do that. And even, Juwan Johnson at 9. I might say, you know what? If I want to take a little swing there, I can make a justification for easily starting Mason Taylor over him as well.
Yep, I'm playing Mason Taylor over Juwan Johnson this week in the league. I have both of them in, and I think I think it's going to be a floor tight end one play in each way. And you would love for Mason Taylor to score touchdowns, but the Jets' offense being what it is, theoretically not happening very much. And Juwan Johnson has been able to do that throughout most of his career and certainly in the early portion of the season for the Saints. You had mentioned Cole Kmet real quick. Colston Loveland off the Bears bye week still might not be ready to go, might not be ready to play. So Cole Kmet, each of the past 2 weeks where Colston Loveland hasn't been available, gotten at least 7 PPR points. You could do a lot worse, and he is widely available and in a good spot against this Commanders defense where there should be some offense too. That Cole Kmet's probably one of those guys that I'll add to the waiver wire article later in the week. Go ahead.
Real quick. Public service announcement. I don't know this will happen, but if you're in a deeper league and if Colston Loveland or Luther Burden on the waiver wire, consider making a preemptive pick to see if out of the bye, because we saw them both be utilized in that game against Dallas. It might have been the beginning of something, but during the bye, it's very possible that Ben Johnson comes out with a plan. I'm interested what the Bears do. And if it does, they're not used in the first game back, then dump them. But if they're sitting in the waiver and you got a roster spot to burn, consider it because it's possible there's a different team coming out of the break.
With all the yellow on your sheet, Jim, you're referring to first world problems if you can afford to roster either Luther Burden or Colston Loveland. But I do agree with you. And this is my PSA to start telling people now. We're in week 6. We got through one of the bye-mageddons, including the 4 teams on bye and then all the injuries. But week 8, there are 6 teams on bye. If you want an advantage, if your team is sitting at 3-3 right now or 3-2, whatever it is, if you could plan accordingly for week 8, do so. Absolutely do so, because it will be crucial and it will catch people like it does every single year. 6 teams on bye week 8. We are 2 weeks away from that happening. Only 2 teams on bye each of the next 2 weeks. It is certainly possible to plan accordingly for what your team will look like in week 8 and possibly steal a win over an opponent who might be dealing with a lot of other bye week stuff as well too. So just keep that in mind. I'll have the PSA next week as well, but we can start planning for it this week with only 2 teams on bye. So there you go. That's the weekly ranking show here every Wednesday with Jim Coventry. Again, if you want to ask the trade questions, JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter, at Jim Coventry, NFL on Twitter as well too. Jim also gets you started 2 hours every Sunday before the games kick off, even in the London games. Jim's not up at 4 in the morning, but Jim will get you set even when there are London games going on with all the start set questions you might have on the RotoWire YouTube page as well too. Appreciate you all listening. We'll be back in this time next week Wednesday. Thanks everyone for following along.